Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Washington Times Media Spotlight. I'm Steve Malzberg. Today, I want to start with what I consider to be the worst kind of media bias. That's fake news by omission. That's when the story itself is left out or it's only partially reported and it's not put into context. And I want to go back to last week's policy address. First policy address, very, very much anticipated. Kamala Harris gave it on Friday in North Carolina. And in it, she discussed how to keep the price of food down.
And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food.
Now, of course, she meant price gouging, not gauging. Gouging and gauging are two different words. They look alike, but they have two different meanings. So that's a pretty big mistake. So as I watched the coverage the rest of the day on Friday, I couldn't find anybody who really referred to it. I Googled it. I didn't see it. I started doubting myself until I picked up on something that Bret Baier said on Friday evening on Fox.
She says she will build what she calls an opportunity economy. The centerpiece, as you just heard there, is a federal ban on price gouging for food.
Okay, so you heard Bret put the emphasis on gouging. He had just played the soundbite that you had heard prior where she said gauging. So it told me I wasn't crazy, that there was something out there. And then I was alerted to the fact, Mediaite had a story, that Chris Cuomo on News Nation, of all people, he really reported on it. Watch.
Price gauging versus gouging. She made a mistake.
And if I was stunned by that, and I was floored by this.
Versus change. So Harris says she's targeting price gouging. I don't really care about gouging, gauging. All right? I don't care. All right. You got to take the level of talent where you find it. We don't have great talent in our politics right now. We got to wait for better people to want to get involved in what is such a poison process.
Did you hear what he said? Wow. To me, that was a direct assault of sorts on the competency of Kamala Harris. I mean, that's how I interpreted it. And I was really, really stunned. Now, Cuomo did say we have other politicians like that. But you know what? At that time, at this time, other politicians aren't running for president at the top of the Democrat ticket. He was talking about her, and he went where basically no other media person went. So can't believe I'm saying it, but kudos to Chris Cuomo. Now, folks, if Donald Trump had given a first policy address or any policy address or at any time confused two similar words that had completely different meanings in a speech that important, you'd still be hearing about it. You'd be hearing about it until the election, and they would say, the media would, that it proves that Donald Trump is not competent for office. Now, surprisingly, many in the mainstream media were critical of Harris's actual plan or parts of it. In an opinion piece for the Washington Post, which appeared earlier in the day on Friday, Catherine Rampell had some free advice for Kamala, which, of course, she did not take. But the piece gained a lot of attention and became a talking point for some in the mainstream media. CNN had Rampell on to talk about her column prior to Harris's event.
Well, first of all, nobody can explain what price gouging means. It's like that old line about pornography. I know it when I see it. In the sense that what does it mean to have an excessive price or an excessive profit margin? That seems to be shorthand for a price or a profit margin. She
went on to talk about a bill that's currently in the Senate where the Federal Trade Commission would decide what prices are too high and who's price gouging. And she wasn't thrilled with that idea.
We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before: Venezuela, Argentina, the Soviet Union, etc. It leads to shortages. It leads to black markets.
Now, this is CNN and the Washington Post we're talking about, and the usually untouchable Kamala Harris. But after Harris spoke, Rampell replied to a tweet about her harsh column by saying that some of what Harris said was silly, but Harris did not say everything that a campaign fact sheet had indicated she would say, and her position on prices was more toned down, and she was okay with it. Backpedaling? You decide. Now, CNN's post-speech analysis of Harris's plan did contain some more criticism.
One thing she did not say is how any of this would be paid for.
But in his next breath, Jeff Zeleny effectively walked back what he had just said about Harris.
Of course, that is not uncommon in a presidential campaign. This is an aspirational level. He never says how he would pay for his plans either. But
of course, he and his refers to who else? Donald Trump. Now, CNN business reporter Julia Chatterley took what Zeleny originally said a bit further.
It wasn't even just about not paying for it. She said she was going to reduce the deficit despite all these giveaways as well. And I understand that's politics at this moment, but...
And then she got down to the nitty-gritty about Harris's proposals.
In the price gouging comments, I just don't know how that federal ban is going to work.
And then Chatterley moved on to Harris's proposal to build 3 million houses in her first term.
A lot of these home builders, and they are saying that they'll provide incentives, they're going to have to borrow money, and we know interest rates are really high, so a lot of that's going to depend on mortgage rates coming down, which could end up fueling house prices even higher if people start buying. But also home builders are going to want to be able to borrow at lower rates as well. I mean, I can pick out a whole host of other things where the devil's going to be in the detail.
Maybe the biggest surprise of all came from the Washington Post editorial board, which ripped apart Harris's economic plan in a piece last Friday evening. They weren't very kind to Harris, not at all. They said, unfortunately, instead of delivering a substantial plan, she squandered the moment on populist gimmicks. Wow, shocking stuff. But in a world, folks, where we had an honest media, this wouldn't be shocking. This would be, okay, great. But it is shocking because we don't have an honest media. And you could bet that the rest of the way, 99.999%, you're going to see softballs in the direction of Kamala Harris, and you're going to see fastballs thrown high and hard at Donald Trump.
I understand why he doesn't want to debate. Kamala Harris is
he's
a
accepted
former
3.
prosecutor.
He said yes to September 4th. September 10th, September 17th. He said yes to a lot of them. So it's not that he's obviously afraid to debate.
No.
All right, back to Bret Baier. Last Tuesday, he was interviewing Harris surrogate Congressman Dan Goldman, and he wouldn't let Goldman get away with what he was saying about Trump and skipping debates and trying to dodge debates. So he fought back, but Goldman kept going.
So, no. He had agreed to September 10th. Well, on ABC.
With Biden, who got pushed out.
What is the difference between candidate Biden and candidate
it's fine.
Harris?
He said he would do it. I'm just saying he's also agreed to other debates. You said he hasn't agreed to others. He has. It's the Kamala Harris campaign that hasn't agreed on the other side.
Good for Bret Baier.
Just so you know, I know all of the people that we're dealing with.
All right, we've all been watching former President Donald Trump delivering remarks. It's been going on for almost a half an hour so far, an opening statement at what was supposed to be a news conference. So far, he hasn't answered one question, hasn't taken any questions.
Oh, so this is supposed to be a news conference. Yeah, like the ones Kamala Harris never gives. Look, Donald Trump was in New Jersey last week. He was giving a news conference. He hadn't started that portion of it yet. He was talking, and that was just too much for CNN to take.
I mean, he's not just carefully scripted. He's literally reading almost word for word from a binder in front of him. Now,
oh, Trump was reading from notes, unlike the teleprompter that Harris reads from every time she gives a speech. You got to be kidding me. So Donald Trump did eventually take questions, as he said he would. But even then, CNN cut out before the press conference was over. And who was there to greet us? Fact checker Daniel Dale.
But I made a whole list here of other claims that were just flat out wrong. Like, this was just a whole bunch of nonsense.
I'm so glad Harris and Walls never spew nonsense. And then Wolf Blitzer looked to go after Donald Trump with this.
David Chalian, what did you make of the way Trump defended his use of personal attacks against Kamala Harris?
This was just vintage Trump.
I guess CNN has never seen a Harris-Walls rally where trashing Trump is almost required. So let's not confuse CNN. Now, I would like to bring you what MSNBC said about this, but while Trump was speaking and then when he was taking questions, they weren't covering it. He wasn't on there live. And in the aftermath, immediately after he finished, they weren't talking about it. So I really don't have anything to bring you from them. But perhaps, folks, I saved the worst for last.
This is a presidential candidate who largely does interviews only with media that is completely friendly to him, is now sitting down for an interview with the richest man on the planet who owns a social media company that the interview was on, and this man openly supports him. How unusual is this?
Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC last Monday after the 2-hour interview Donald Trump gave to Elon Musk live on X. She's making it sound so nefarious. I mean, of course it was unusual, but so what? Kamala Harris, again, doesn't do any interviews. And then we had this.
Let's not call it an interview, because that sort of, I think, demeans the idea of independent journalism in a way. When you have a billionaire who's endorsed you rambling on and talking in this kind of format, it's not an interview.
Independent journalism? Don't make me laugh. MSNBC is independent journalism, or for that matter, CNN or any of the mainstream media? I don't think so. And by the way, it was an interview. By definition, it was an interview. Come on. Now, folks, this is the kind of bias that we look for here at the Washington Times Media Spotlight. And when we find it, I'll bring it to you. We'll bring it to you. I'm Steve Malzberg. I want to thank you for watching. Please share the link and tell your friends. And until next time, stay safe.